in 1991, Nintendo made the Donkey Man game. Oh, this is number 2, it's not number 1. And...
Harley, what are you doing?
Mike! I'm making a new video! It's been years! Evans is still trapped playing Castlevania!
Harley, where are the bananas? You were guarding the bananas, right?
It's too late. They got them all. I couldn't do anything.
Who's they?
You know who.
Shit. We're out of practice. What would DK do?
Make a Mike versus video.
Alright then. Let's go.
Right, okay Harley, here we are. It's been a while since the last video.
What are you talking about? I thought it was only the other day.
But today we're here to talk about Donkey Kong Country and the future of the franchise. Here I have all of my Donkey Kong games, every single one, all my favourites.
I'm not seeing Donkey Kong 64 here.
All my favourite Donkey Kong games are here.
Alrighty then.
It's the source of all of DK's power.
Yeah.
That's why King K. Rool wanted the bananas. Not only do I have bananas, but I've also got banana milkshake as well to power me through this video, so I'll just pour that into my lovely DK mug.
That's a special kind of fuel.
Oh, banana.
Right, where do we start? Donkey Kong. I guess we should probably start with the SNES games. Well, I guess we should probably acknowledge, obviously, Donkey Kong started off with the arcade game, but there's not much point, talking about that because everybody knows that.
Yeah, I feel like that's a story that's been done to death. Everyone, Donkey Kong being the original Mario game. So yeah, it was like back in 1994. You had Nintendo wanted to. I guess they kind of did 2 Donkey Kong games because you had the one that they call Donkey Kong 94 now, which is like the remake of the original arcade one on the Game Boy.
Kind of a remake, kind of not.
Yeah, like a really enhanced splendor of a game. And then, at the same time you had Donkey Kong Country that they decided to go full out and make a 2D platformer, next-gen graphics on that game.
That's what made it stand out at the time, wasn't it? It was the pre-rendered silicon graphic computers, the way they rendered the whole game gave it a very unique look, which still looks good today, I think.
Yeah, well I think it depends on who you ask. For a 16-bit console trying to do like realistic backgrounds and things, like pre-rendered stuff, which, I mean, now you think of even Square were doing with Final Fantasy on the PlayStation and things like that. Nintendo and Rare were kind of doing that already with Donkey Kong Country, and
it's just so weird as well that the Japanese were willing to let Western studio Rare, have one of their most beloved characters, and kind of just go nuts with it and do what they want.
Well, yeah, and it was, it wasn't just that, this was one of Shigeru Miyamoto's creations as well, like handing that over to a company like Rare, and at the time, I guess no one really knew what they were gonna, what the outcome was gonna be.
Yeah, it was a big risk at the time, and Nintendo putting a load of money into it. But yeah, just letting them make characters like Diddy Kong, changing the canon, the DK lore, so you had Cranky Kong as like the original DK. I do wonder if Miyamoto even knew they made that change, and like when they actually released it, he just read the instruction manual. He was like, "Hold on, I didn't."
What do you do with my character?
But yeah, I mean, the game came out, and like at the time, it was beloved by all. It's in the top 5 best-selling SNES games. But people often say that gameplay-wise, it's probably the first game in the series is probably not as great as the sequels, just because it was more about the visuals, I think, than the actual mechanics.
I think at the time, yeah, I think in Rare's mind, as long as they made a good you know, a semi-decent 2D platformer, and it looked good and sounded good, I think that was going to be a success for them.
Definitely sounded good.
Oh yeah, and that was the thing. Like the music was such a big part of that as well.
Yeah. If you compare the music to something like Mario World, just the instrumentation of all the tunes, just like all those like sound samples that David Wise used to kind of like generate more, I don't know, orchestral sort of music. Yeah, I hadn't really heard my music like that on the SNES or any game system up to that point.
Don't know. It was like the opposite of how Nintendo would normally approach the Mario tunes, where instead of these like upbeat like jingly tunes, instead you were going more for ambience, more for kind of making you feel
more
like
sort of atmospheric.
If you were walking through a cave in Donkey Kong Country, you would have, you know, the sounds of a cave. You would have like all the echoes. You could kind of almost listen to that outside of Donkey Kong Country as well.
Yeah.
It's not like if you listen to it on its own standalone thing, you'd know it was from a 2D platformer.
Yeah.
It just didn't have that video gamey kind of music that you normally heard up until that point.
Obviously, David Wise is just a fantastic composer. And he did the music for most of the series. It's definitely part of the Donkey Kong Country DNA. Like, you need to have David Wise in there, really. So yeah, when it came to graphics and the music, it definitely, you know, was excellent in that regard. But yeah, the gameplay of the first one was just, when you compare it to like, again, Mario World, which had like all the different abilities and you had like the secret exits and, you know, finding all the switches and things. And yeah, Donkey Kong Country 1 didn't really innovate in terms of that, but they definitely improved it in the sequels. Especially Donkey Kong Country 2, which most people regard as being like the best in the series.
Oh yeah.
What's your favourite?
That's a tough one. I actually do like number 1 quite a lot. There's a lot of tunes and sort of atmosphere in there I thought was pretty unique, whereas things were a bit grander in number 2 and 3. But I do like the simplicity of number 1.
Yeah.
But
so you kind of had your themes with 2 and 3, where you had like the pirate theme in 2, and then 3 was kind of just like some weird like Canadian countryside.
Yeah, it's like Donkey Kong in Canada.
Yeah. So Donkey Kong Land, that came out on the Game Boy, and that was almost like a port of Donkey Kong Country 1, except that obviously limited resources working on the Game Boy. So they kind of restructured a lot of the levels, but they also kind of created some new worlds as well to explore. Like,
yeah. I mean, you had the Cloud World, you had the Big Ape City as well.
Yeah.
Which was kind of meant to be a throwback to that. Well, they say it's meant to be a throwback to that original Donkey Kong arcade area.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because obviously Mario Odyssey kind of did the same thing so many years later.
Yeah.
But Donkey Kong Land did it first.
It's like in the Mario canon, they could be the same places.
Yeah,
I like to think.
I like to dream that they're the same place.
So yeah, then the other Land games came out. They were closer to being straight up ports.
Yeah, those. I mean, Donkey Kong Land 2, from what I remember, is just trying to be a one-to-one port, whereas Donkey Kong Land 3 was kind of more of a rearranged levels sort of port, like same sort of worlds, but
it's kind of like the Mega Man Game Boy game.
Yeah.
Same sort of tile sets, just rearranged levels, same bosses. But yeah, Donkey Kong Land 1 is definitely worth playing just because of how different it is. Because yeah, you've also got the different bosses and the music as well, some brand new tracks.
Yeah.
Are really good. So yeah, you had those 3 original games, and then we got to the N64.
Yeah.
I have serious beef with DK64 because it was basically just an unfinished Banjo game that was just turned into a Donkey Kong game.
Well, that's kind of what it felt like, yeah. I mean, everything that we talked about for Donkey Kong Country, I don't think any of that really applies to DK64. Between the Donkey Kong Country trilogy and DK64, you had you had the success of Banjo-Kazooie. That's what they were best at doing.
But yeah, Nintendo were probably looking at the sales figures of that game, being like, wow, we just kind of want another one of these.
Which is why you had no David Wise, no ambient music. It was back to sort of video gamey.
Again, the tracks just felt like leftover banjo tracks.
Yeah, it was. You could play them side by side, and to someone who didn't know the difference between the two, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you any difference. If you play a Donkey Kong Country track next to a Banjo-Kazooie track, there's a big night and day difference.
So obviously, like, Grant Kirkhope is a fantastic composer in his own right, and he can definitely do that kind of goofy, light-hearted, platforming music, but it's just so different from what like the core essence of Donkey Kong Country is. I do wonder why they ended up using David Wise in like the goofy car racing game Diddy Kong Racing, and then they assigned Grant Kirkhope to do DK64, the successor to Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah, it's
very strange.
It's like they picked the two wrong names out of the hat for the two for the two different projects.
Bizarre. We haven't really talked about the actual mechanics of the game. Like, it's just a shit version of Banjo. It feels very rushed together because I think Nintendo wanted out for that holiday, and obviously you've got the famous thing where there was the glitch that could only be fixed by using an expansion pack in N64.
They tried to tell you that the expansion pack was because the game was so big and amazing that it needed the expansion pack to be as good as it was.
But yeah, just like a terrible game. Just so much like backtracking, the awkwardness of like switching between all the characters because you can only pick up bananas with certain Kongs is just a nightmare. The levels are just generic and bland. I guess one of the best things to come out of the game is King K. Rool. Like, he was presented pretty well in that game.
Yeah, that final boss fight in the boxing ring, that does make it all worthwhile.
I guess we should talk about like the big hiatus where there was just like nothing for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, I say nothing, it was more sort of spin-off kind of titles because we had Donkey Konga, which is a fun party game.
That's it, yeah. I mean, that was like Namco that took over for a little while.
Yeah. Once you had the bongos, then you also had Jungle Beat.
Yeah, Jungle Beat, which was a
platforming game.
Yeah, and that was made by. The thing I always forget is that was made by the main Nintendo team as well. That was
and Koizumi was the director of that game, I believe. But I mean, visually, it looks quite similar to the Donkey Kong Country Returns games that came out later on the Wii, but the main difference is that you have to use the bongos to control yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you still did have the option for the GameCube controller.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was. But I mean, the way the game sort of sold itself was using the bongos and the clapping.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure how effective it was if you actually did try to use it with the controller, but it was there as a backup anyway.
So DK was still kind of, prevalent throughout the GameCube era, just not in the way we kind of wanted him to be.
Yeah, it was, spin-offs and, there was not going to be... I don't know if Rare had any plans to do a follow-up to any more Donkey Kong games, because, they were working on their Dinosaur Planet thing.
Yeah, well, I think they were working on a Donkey Kong racing game for the GameCube.
Oh, that was, yeah.
Which would have been sort of like a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing.
I mean, they did the ports for the Game Boy Advance of the original trilogy.
Oh yeah, wasn't that whilst they were still owned by Microsoft?
I think so, yeah.
ドンキーとディディが愉快な仲間と大暴れ。ミニゲームも楽しいゲームボーイアドバンススーパードンキーコング。
We like to refer to these as the George Lucas special editions of the Donkey Kong Country games because, I mean, they've got all the same levels, but they just made all these weird little tweaks.
Well, it kind of felt like that. What we were saying about Donkey Kong 64 being a bit more goofy and things like that, sort of lacking that David Wise touch, sort of that ended up kind of leaking into that Game Boy Advance trilogy.
Yeah, it felt so cartoony and silly.
Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah. But they started putting in a bunch of extra stuff to do in the games. Like they added more collectibles, which is again a lot more like Banjo as well. And then not only that, but they kind of looked a bit crap compared to the SNES games because they enhanced the brightness because the original GBA didn't have the backlight. So when you play them on like an emulator, they just look absolutely horrible.
Well, that's the thing. I think that was a problem with a lot of those. Well, with Super Nintendo to Game Boy Advance ports, you kind of got the colours all washed out and things like that.
So you even have like that Banjo transition where it goes like the silhouette goes like the whoop whoop.
They just wanted to make it a cartoon, and I wonder if that was around. I wonder if that was after you had the actual CG cartoon for Donkey Kong as well.
Don't worry, Diddy! Bananas llama!
Well, we could do a whole separate video on the Donkey Kong Country TV show.
I'll be a monkey's uncle.
It wasn't me!
It's weird, yeah, because the third game, I kind of think it's definitely the best out of the ports because David Wise, who wasn't,
he came back,
because he wasn't originally involved in. I think he might have done a couple of the tracks for the first version of Donkey Kong Country 3. But yeah, he composed the whole new original score for that GBA version of the game, and some of the tracks are definitely better than the SNES ones. Some I prefer on the SNES, some I prefer the GBA version of. And they even added like a whole new world as well. So yeah, they changed up quite a lot in that one. That's definitely one you have to play at some point, just because it's interesting to see the changes. And if you love David Wise's music, then yeah, hands down, check that one out. Yeah, after the GameCube, you kind of had you had a Japanese developer kind of taking over from Rare called Payon, and they started making some games that again weren't traditional platformers. But you had King of Swing on the GBA, which is like kind of a weird. It's like a puzzle platformer where you've got to like use your momentum to kind of swing up vertically. But it's weird because it started bringing back like a lot of the characters from the Donkey Kong Country games that had been missing for a while. You know, like you've got the ghost of Wrinkly Kong, of course.
Oh yeah.
Funky Dixie, and obviously King K. Rool as well. Before he disappeared.
Yeah.
And then they made Barrel Blast if you live in America, and Jet Race if you're in Europe, which is like a 3D racing game that was clearly intended to be on the GameCube.
Yeah, that was definitely meant to be a bongos game. And I mean, I don't think that game even tries to hide the fact that it was meant to use the bongos.
Yeah, sadly, that didn't make it to the GameCube, and it came out for the Wii, and then you had to use motion controls, which just fucks your wrists up when you're trying to play that.
Yeah, even though you can still plug bongos into the Wii, but...
That's dumb. I really hope someone modifies that game one day so that it actually detects the bongos so you can play it the way it was meant to be played.
Get to work, modders. So everything recently had just been spin-offs. Like, the racing, the jungle climbing, or spin-offs or ports, so...
You definitely had people like kind of wondering where DK had gone. And then there was that E3 where they announced a new Donkey Kong Country platforming game being developed by the developers who did the Metroid Prime series.
That's
Donkey Kong
right,
Country
yeah.
Returns.
As you know, Retro Studios in Texas has produced some great Metroid titles. But when they said they were ready for something new, we asked them to take one of the most treasured franchises in video game history and to make it magic again. If you listen, you can hear it coming.
Basically, like, it was finally the Donkey Kong Country 4 in everything but the name, really.
Yeah. It was kind of the game we'd all been waiting for, and they definitely cashed in on the nostalgia of it. because it uses a lot of the music from the first game especially. But it was nice because obviously Retro had done so well with the Metroid Prime series. They kind of wanted to tap into a different genre that they weren't too familiar with, and they did a pretty good job. David Wise wasn't there to do the music. I think it was Kenji Yamamoto, is that his name?
I think so, yeah.
Who was famous doing the Metroid music. And he basically just remixed David Wise's tracks from the first game.
Used a lot more natural instruments and things like that.
Definitely an upgrade from DK64. So it came out and it sold a shit zillion copies.
3DS port.
3DS port, and then they made Tropical Freeze, which is like one of the best platforming games ever made.
Yeah, I think it's a nice place to be when you know the latest DK game is the best of the bunch.
They brought David Wise back, and he did a fantastic job. Some of the best music he's ever composed, I honestly think. When it was first announced, people were pretty annoyed that Retro weren't going to make a new Metroid game. And that definitely hurt the sales of it.
I mean, it came out at an unfortunate time. Any game that comes out on the Wii U was sadly being marched out to die, really. So it's nice that it finally got sort of the credit it deserved from getting ported to the Switch, and and everyone sort of got to really appreciate the game.
– 2018 was like a pretty good year for Donkey Kong because, first of all, you kind of had that Donkey Kong expansion for that Mario vs. Rabbids thing.
Oh yeah, they bigged up the DK thing in that.
And they even got Grant Kirkhope back for that one.
That guy we were singing praises about earlier on, yeah.
And then obviously like the big thing, the thing I've wanted for so long.
Is it King K. Rool?
King K. Rool finally came to Smash Brothers.
Yeah. And that was a big deal for anyone who was fond of Donkey Kong Country. Because I mean, King K. Rool as a villain was kind of one of those characters that had always been... He'd never been as popular as Bowser or anything. But anyone who did know enough about the character knew that he had this kind of quite crazy personality, which kind of stuck with a lot of people.
You had so many sort of anime type characters with swords, and it was just nice to actually have another heavyweight who's in there and who's a villain. And it's just more DK rap as well, because that franchise was so badly represented in Smash Brothers up until now. So I think we're in a good position at the moment when it comes to Donkey Kong, which is why we're here, Harley. We're going to talk about what is next.
What is next?
Yeah. You got a bit of banana on you. I think there are three potential ways that the Donkey Kong franchise could go. There are three potential developers I have in mind that I think will do the next Donkey Kong game. So obviously Retro Studios has just recently been announced to be working on Metroid Prime
4, yeah.
And we've not heard what they've been working on since Tropical Freeze. I'm kind of hoping that once they'd finished Tropical Freeze, they had started work on a third game in the series.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of hoping, now that Nintendo's kind of gone to Retro for help with Prime 4, hopefully that means maybe Retro, who could have been working on a Donkey Kong project until now, maybe they could wrap that up and start on Prime 4.
You can just feel so much love is poured into Tropical Freeze. Like, they definitely care about the franchise. And it'd be a fantastic opportunity for the Kremlings to come back as well.
Well, that's it. People know who King K. Rool is now because of Smash Bros. And I mean, the Kremlings had sort of appeared, like in the 3DS Smash Bros. Kremlings were in Smash Run and things like that. So, you know, all these characters have been kind of hiding in the background. And
I mean, we even had Kremlings in like some of the Mario sports titles.
Oh yeah, like Strikers and Strikers Charged and all that.
So yeah, Retro, I think Ubisoft could potentially be...
They've not, it's not one that you'd normally think of, but I guess they haven't done too bad a job handling a lot of the Nintendo things so far.
Yeah, because that's the only reason I bring them up is they've been handling some sort of Star Fox stuff with their what's that game called?
I was literally about to say what it was then.
Star game, Star Flight,
Gladiator.
Star something. Yeah. So, but other than that, they've also worked on this Mario Rabbids thing, and I think Miyamoto especially has been quite impressed with their work. And you know, Donkey Kong is Miyamoto's baby.
Yeah, well, Miyamoto should be impressed. Like Ubisoft made a better Star Fox game than what Miyamoto made, so.
Yeah, sad but true. But I also think Koizumi from Mario Odyssey could potentially do a 3D sort of spiritual successor to DK64.
Yeah.
I only say that because of all the DK fan service that's in Mario Odyssey. With like, you know, the street names and the shop names and things. And he did work on Jungle Beat as well.
That's right, yeah.
So I feel like deep down he really loves the Dong.
He wants to expand it, yeah. That's the thing, like going back to DK64, it's, you know, as much as we gripe about the game, there are still ideas in there that you would want to see done better in like a potential sequel.
Yeah. Like a big adventure game with multiple characters that you can choose. Almost more like Sonic Adventure kind of style.
Yeah, you could have where each character actually has their own unique take on a level.
Yeah.
Rather than just being given the same level and being forced to do it 5 times with different characters.
If you took that 3D Donkey Kong game, but instead of Grant Kirkhope, you used David Wise's music, like that could bring a whole different kind of experience to the table, I think. Because people wouldn't be so much comparing it to Mario Odyssey. I think they'd really feel like this was actually a true successor to Donkey Kong Country, but just in the third dimension.
Well, yeah, and then you would go back to that original comparison, like we were talking about before, between Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country being 2 very different 2D platformers. You would have that same thing again.
Yeah.
Rather than DK64, which is just trying to copy a previous game like Banjo and Mario 64. Instead, you'd have something different, something that's actually trying to capture what was strong about the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, turning that, boosting it up to 11.
I think the way that the Smash Brothers Donkey Kong stages, the ones in Ultimate, if you could make a 3D game that looked like that, go for that sort of slightly more realistic look, I think would be amazing. And again, differentiate it from Odyssey. It's just so weird. Donkey Kong is this massive, recognizable character. If I go on the streets and I show some old lady a picture of Donkey Kong, there's a chance she might actually know who that is.
Yeah, it's not impossible, no.
If I show her a picture of Marth, she ain't gonna know who Marth is. It's just strange because, yeah, their focus seems to be sort of Fire Emblem, obviously Pokemon, and Mario. But they've got this other big giant icon that they just, I don't know, they're just so sparse with these games. They just don't, I don't know what they're doing.
You know, Tropical Freeze is like winding down from the honeymoon period now.
So yeah, people are kind of realizing how fantastic the game actually is.
And I guess for a little while, Metroid fans were kind of in the same boat where they didn't know where their franchise was going.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you had Samus Returns and the Prime 4 announcement. So
I guess you've also got the Donkey Kong attractions that are opening at the Nintendo Universal Studios Park. So it's like they're clearly trying to make a slight little push and create more awareness about the DK brand.
Well, Nintendo seems to know if they're going as far as making a theme park attraction, then Nintendo must know that there is money to be made in Donkey Kong.
So I think what really needs to happen with Donkey Kong is that they just need to make a dedicated studio to just kind of focus on the franchise and kind of re-establish these characters again for like a new generation of Nintendo fans. Because the only real way to find out about these characters is like to go back to the SNES games, and who wants to play SNES games because they're old?
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, trying to... apparently Nintendo doesn't want people playing SNES games either now.
No.
Like, with how accessible they've made them recently. So Nintendo release these games on the Switch Virtual Console.
Yes, please, that'd be great.
And any other Super Nintendo games would also be nice.
Yeah, do you see what I mean by just this whole kind of attitude that they just maybe didn't like the fact that Japan sort of didn't create a lot of the stuff that made Donkey Kong kind of iconic?
Yeah, it's hard. It's kind of hard to say what the reasons might have been. I mean, they've definitely been. There's been times where they have embraced the Donkey Kong characters, like the time when we had Funky Kong appearing in Mario Kart Wii and things like that.
Yeah. You had that, but then they took Diddy Kong and Funky Kong out of Mario Kart.
Yeah. Then, you know, a few games later or one game later, it's like Donkey Kong's back in the bad books again, and
Yeah.
it's like,
well, you have all these characters representing Mario, that's fine, whatever, but then you've got like Baby Rosalina and Baby Daisy, and you have Baby Donkey Kong, but he's not actually in the game.
yeah, there was a Baby Donkey Kong.
It's just the characters as well, like outside of Donkey Kong, they're just so like relatable, I guess. You know, if you look at Funky Kong, you just look at him, you know what that guy's about.
The way I see it is the Mario characters, they're kind of not allowed to be emotional, they're not allowed to get pissed off or anything like that. Mario's always got to be happy. Whereas like you look at like Cranky Kong and DK, like they're not perfect, they just sit around. I mean, Donkey Kong's there scratching his ass, just sitting on the ground, and Cranky Kong's just being annoyed at everything, and it's kind of like, I feel like characters like that are definitely going to be more relatable than the most you ever see from the main Mario cast is like Luigi being scared or something like that. So basically what we're saying is Nintendo needs to completely get rid of Mario, make DK the new face of Nintendo.
You need to just like kind of establish the fact that the Donkey Kong Country games take place in the Mario universe,
While still giving the DK cast the chance to kind of breathe in that bigger picture as well. I do sometimes wonder if Nintendo have they sometimes view Donkey Kong as just one of Mario's sort of sidekicks, like in the Mario Party games. They sometimes look at that before they look at the Donkey Kong Country series as its own thing.
Definitely.
Because it's so weird to kind of put it into words, but when I see DK in Mario Party, I don't really see the main character of Donkey Kong Country, I just see the big ape that hangs with Mario sort of thing. It's
Just the guy who's in like the promotional costume. It's like the Venom Kong. It's not actually the real DK. So I think we've pretty much said what we need to say, but there are just 3 things that we really want to see going forward. So obviously we want a new platforming game, hopefully by Retro, with hopefully just a consistent developer going forward. We want to see the Donkey Kong Country characters in Mario Kart and any other sort of sports spin-offs, or even in the party games, like get Dixie Kong in Mario Party.
Yep, less pink gold peaches and more King K. Rool.
Yes. Yeah, having King K. Rool in the spin-off games would be amazing, and just Mario Kart, that'd be so good. And yeah, when it comes to music, as much as we like you, Grant Kirkhope, please, let's get David Wise in there for good. But yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Mike Versus.